Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here with you at this very important conference, and I'd like to thank the President of the University and Dr. Kenna and his colleagues for inviting me to be with you. And it's great that there are so many practitioners, academics, policymakers coming from 17 countries and I think a number of continents, and you know, it couldn't be more timely, particularly in terms of the cycle of Ireland's history, but also I think in many other parts of the world, many of the same issues are arising, maybe not with the same intensity as we have to deal with them here, but certainly I think we can all learn from each other. I think also that we do need to keep at the centre of all of our thinking what the President of the University and indeed the President of Ireland has just been quoted as saying, that what we're talking about is homes. We're talking about the homes of the people. So whatever policies we're making, whatever practices we're carrying out, I think we have to keep that at the centre of our thinking all of the time. And I think it is very pertinent that Uachtaráin na hÉireann has sent that message to us. As I said, I don't think it could possibly be more timely that we're having a conference like this today, and I congratulate you for it. In order to address the future, we have to look at the past as well. And I've heard some commentators trace the origin of the credit splurge to the loosening of regulation in the major banking centres in the 80s and thereafter. And of course the capital markets are global, and in order to compete successfully, one sector will seek to enjoy the same laxity of control as their competitors in other jurisdictions. Pressure is brought to bear on administrations to mirror rival administrations, and soon the race to the bottom is in full swing. A glut of capital in these markets in recent decades, historically low interest rates, and a pernicious culture of performance-based bonuses for lenders made for a pretty heady cocktail. The challenges to explore even more audacious lending models led to the now infamous bundling of subprime lending with less risky ventures in order to sweeten the pill. And we all know the result. The property sector in any country is no different to any other commodity provider, and given the chance to make greater profits from a demand-driven market, will respond with enthusiasm. The tenets of sound commercial practice soon evaporate, and the acceleration of supply inevitably leads to an oversupply. When the market receives a sudden sharp shock, as happened in 2008 in this country and other places, the resulting turmoil was inevitable. In Ireland, we have traditionally had one of the highest rates of home ownership in Western Europe. We've had a love affair with bricks and mortar, and this was nurtured by successive administrations extending all kinds of incentives to individuals to own their own homes. The desire to own one's own home was a social imperative and drove many people to borrow beyond what was sustainable given their individual circumstances. There is anecdotal evidence that this paradigm may now be changing. The newer generation of homeowners have seen their dreams shattered and their lives blighted by acquiring a mountain of debt for properties which in many instances have halved in value. The application of regulations, even light regulation, should act as a buffer against catastrophic system failures. And yet, as we now know, those who were entrusted to guard the gates fell asleep in the sentry box. Prudent conditions which applied to the granting of mortgage finance were either sidestepped or in some cases ignored. Stress testing was based upon unrealistic expectations and a belief that the housing market, like the universe, was constantly expanding. Even amateur cosmologists know that our universe will slow and contract in time. Canny commentators who predicted a similar contraction in our housing sector were at best ignored and often derided to our collective detriment. When our administration, the administration that I belong to, when we came to office, it was like walking into a casino in the harsh light of morning. The bankers were hungover, the developers in a daze at the extent of their losing streak, and the regulators in shock that the house had lost too. The champagne was decidedly flat and the balloons had burst. There is only one thing to do with a mess, and that's, I think we all know, clean it up. We have had to apply all of our energy and endeavour to commence the mammoth task of putting our house in order. We've worked with determination to recapitalise our financial institutions and restore a fully functioning and adequately regulated banking sector. We've surveyed the construction sector to establish the level of overhang in the market and devise suitable absorption policies. We are addressing the problems associated with unfinished housing developments, and in fact I chair a committee which has representation from a variety of organisations, including NAMA, including the construction sector, etc., addressing that issue. And especially we have to address the health and safety aspects of unfinished housing developments. And we're working, as I said, with all of the stakeholders to achieve satisfactory outcomes. We have adapted our social housing models in order to realign them in favour of tenant-based solutions and towards delivery options more relevant to the 21st century and to the conditions that, unfortunately, we have to contend with. And we have commenced the policy of diverting some of the housing overhang to social use by collaborating with NAMA, the National Asset Management Agency, and the voluntary and cooperative sector. Most importantly, we're addressing the problems of homeowners who are in difficulties to resolve their problems, even when the loan is deemed unsustainable. And there are a variety of actions that the government is taking in this regard. And from the point of view of my own department, for example, we have introduced a system called mortgage to rent, which is, it's pretty much, I suppose, the end of the line for many people when their mortgage is simply unsustainable. And what we're setting up is the opportunity for those people to stay in their own homes, but to rent the property, either from a voluntary housing association or a local authority, rather than have to actually give it back and try and find housing elsewhere. And we have about 50 families who are going through that process at the moment, so we hope to accelerate it. These developments have occurred in the short period of time we've been in office, and we have many challenges ahead. In order to achieve a realignment of the housing market away from unsustainable acquisition, for example, we must induce a vibrant and properly regulated private rental sector. This new market must reflect the needs and rights of both tenant and landlord by defining standards of accommodation, their respective responsibilities to maintain properties, and ensuring security of extended tenure for tenants. And I know that many other countries are very far in advance of Ireland in terms of regulating the private market, but we have to catch up on that and we have to do it quickly. In other areas, we must re-examine planning regulation and standards to address the mistakes of the past, a process which I've already initiated by means of a legislative review group. And we have to ask ourselves fundamental questions, such as the appropriate levels of regulation which allow a market to function while guarding against collapse, or are variable interest rate mortgages appropriate to home loans? In short, we have to conduct a root and branch examination of the housing sector and establish a profile of the way our society should look in the future and the components of that profile. Throughout Western Europe and beyond, the scenarios which I've outlined to you are replicated to varying degrees. The responses to the issues raised by our recent profligacy are in the hands of people like yourselves. And for that reason, I'm very pleased, as I said at the beginning, that this conference is taking place. I think there are huge lessons that we all have to learn from each other. I think we in Ireland, particularly because we have been on the back foot in many ways in relation to many of these issues, including regulating the private sector, including regulating appropriately and watching the gate in terms of lending practices and a whole wide variety of other areas. We have to learn, but we have to learn quickly, I think. We have to provide for our citizens in the short term and in the longer term. And we have to use whatever resources we have at our disposal to ensure that we do provide, to go back to the beginning, that we do provide homes that are appropriate to people's needs, homes where people can be comfortable, can live, can raise their families if they have families, and can feel that they can call it their own, albeit if they don't actually own it, that there is a sense that they are in a stable, comfortable and appropriate environment for themselves and their families. So that is the challenge that we have ahead of us. I know that the outcome of this conference will certainly help us in terms of all learning from each other as to how we move forward to the future. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. I wish you well with the rest of the conference. And again, I congratulate you for holding it. Thank you very much.